Welcome back. So now we have gone through growth ratios, we've looked at profitability ratios, we've looked at the efficiency ratios, and we've briefly described, although I don't think I spent a very good amount of time explaining some of these and the nuances of them. We'll do that after we finish populating. So now we move into liquidity, right? This is going to be a really quick video just on liquidity ratios. So liquidity ratios, what are we talking about? Well, we're saying how liquid are we, right? And specifically, we're saying, it's not liquid in any physical sense, but it's saying, can we pay the bills, right? Do we have enough capital to pay our bills? If we are illiquid, then that means we don't have enough current capability, current resources to pay our current obligations. That's kind of the layman's way of saying that. So we're going to look at different levels of resources that we have today that we can use to pay off obligations that we have today or in the near term, right? So we start off with the current ratio. And the current ratio is just going to be our current assets divided by current liabilities. So where are our current assets? They're right there. And we divide that by our current liabilities right there. Okay, so that means that we have 1.2 times as many current assets as we do current liabilities. And that's a good thing. And then we copy that over to the right and we realize that sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes we have less assets than we have, or current assets than current liabilities. That is a bad thing, typically. All right, so then we have our quick ratio, and the quick ratio is now saying, okay, well, we took current assets, right? Current assets was our cash, our accounts receivable, our inventories, all these added up to get us that 133, and we divided it by our current liabilities, right? So all these things that go into our current liabilities. So now we're going to say, well, let's look at a little bit more specific, and we will look at just our cash plus marketable securities plus receivables. So really in this situation, the only thing we're doing is removing inventories, right? So we're going to take our sum of cash and our accounts receivable, and we're going to divide that by our total current liabilities. All right, and you see that number gets a little bit smaller because now we have a little bit less funds to pay, right? And then finally we look at our cash. One second. Okay, sorry for the pause there. I had a video that I did the last video just started randomly playing in the background and it distracted me. Okay, so we have the current, that's our current assets for current liabilities, our quick ratio, which is taking away our inventories in this case, but would typically be saying, okay, well, let's look at if assuming we can't sell our inventories, right? I mean, maybe we're in a situation where we have declining sales because no one's buying our inventory. So you can see, for example, here our inventories are rising. If inventories are rising, maybe we cannot sell those inventories to pay off our current liabilities. So we remove that for the quick ratio. And finally we say, well, maybe all of our securities, maybe our accounts receivable, no one's going to pay us, and we just really need to look and see, can we, with our cash and securities, pay off our debt? So here we say our cash, and we divide that by our current liabilities, and we see that's a very low number. we are pretty illiquid in this case, not liquid, that is. And let's just go ahead and extend that out by 1 decimal just to show how illiquid we are. All right, and finally we get to the interval measure. Okay, and this is going to be looking at a slightly different way. It's basically saying what our operating costs are, our daily operating costs, and it's saying, do we have enough liquid capital on hand to pay our daily operating costs? All right, that's just a slightly different way of looking at this. So first thing we have to do is find our cash and marketable securities and receivables. So we already did that on a previous one, right? So we took cash and we took our receivables. Okay, and then the next thing we have to do is find our operating costs and divide that by 365. So what we do is we will just take the sum of here, the sum of, I have to put a parentheses, right, the sum of our cost of goods sold and our sales and general administration expenses, right? And because those are our operating costs. and then we will divide that number by 365, close that parentheses, and that should give us this number of what our current capital is compared to our daily operating costs, and we can spin that over to the right and check it out. All right, now one thing you will notice is that in the formulas, sometimes they will add back and remove a lot of the depreciation, especially we'll see that in some of the coming measures. That's because there are different ways of itemizing depreciation. We have it here listed out in its own line, but oftentimes you see we explicitly stated excluding depreciation. Sometimes it's wrapped up inside cost of goods sold, so you would have to go into the balance sheet and look for another account called accumulated depreciation, which you would then have to kind of subtract 1 year from the other year to find out how much depreciation there was in 1 year, and then subtract that from cost of goods sold. And that's just a really complicated way of saying that you don't need to worry about that in this case, and we'll look at that in the next ratios. All right, talk to you soon. We'll be back next time to go through the leverage ratios.